So it's not just, oh, that one arc and we're doing it. We are going through these loops, so to speak.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might actually go backward before you can take another step forward.
Very true. Yeah.
And sometimes the storyline might break down.
Yes.
So it's not this neat linear process. It never is.
No.
So let's just leverage, the power of story to address the misalignments that keep coming up, right? So I would love for you to be able to share with the audience about these stages that you have talked in the book about.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned that the beginning of the journey is, in storytelling terms, that's the first act. And the first two stages in that act are the dream and leap. So that's when the leader communicates their vision and then people have a choice to jump in. The real interesting and hard part of that journey is the middle, what we call the messy middle.
Yes.
And it's bloody messy. It's a lot of fluids involved, and psychologically speaking anyway, because that's where people have to actually start doing something different, and they most often fail at that. And so it's a struggle. And in the middle there, that messy middle, the two stages are called fight and climb.
Yes.
So once people decide that they're going to join you on this journey, they make that leap of faith, they have to start trying to implement your change. And right away, they're going to encounter obstacles, mindsets. People inside the organization say, this is dumb. We've tried this before. It failed every time. Why bother? Or external resistance, competitors, activist investors, a lot of questions and challenges to the vision, and just the sheer hard work of doing something new. Yeah. So they're going to have to fight those battles, and every time they overcome one of those battles, they climb a little closer to the goal, which is why climb is right there. And after enough of that, kind of the skirmishes that happen in the forward and the back, eventually you arrive at the goal, which is the third act of the change story. And as you said, story, it both describes the shape of that journey, but it's also the tool you can use to move people through that journey. And you do that by telling different kinds of stories at different stages. So in the beginning, a lot of times people tell sort of like the calling story. Yeah. Where did this idea come from? Who was the customer that had the need that made me realize this is the direction we need to go? Or what was the failure that taught us that we needed to make a change and get on a new path? In the leap stage, people need to hear stories about why it's worth making this choice. What might you stand to lose if you don't actually implement this change? Yeah. And in the fight stage, that's when we all tell our literal battle stories. Yeah. And a lot of times too, when we rely on sports metaphors, let's talk about the soccer team or the Warriors who just lost last night. You want to personify the enemy, get people riled up and give them hope that they can actually overcome that battle. Yeah. And the climb stage is when, it's all about endurance. And so people need to be encouraged to believe that they're succeeding. They need to hear stories of the little wins, the things that are working, the reasons to keep plugging away at this change. And then arrive is when really what you need to do is look back on the whole journey, give people the time and space to share their own stories of what they experienced, what worked well, what didn't, because people need that kind of catharsis, that time to vent, before you can push them off on their next adventure.
Right. It's so aligned with the emotional roller coaster that people go through when they are going through the stages of change, and the right type of story you want to tell at the right point in time. In your experience, have you found that there in an organization, especially in times of things like digital transformation, etc., because you're trying to align a lot of different groups, which may be at different points of the curve in their commitment to what we are trying to do, their experience, their expectation, and how they see it unfolding. So how have you seen that reality play out? So we find that turns out that the IT people can't wait to start ahead. They're like, you don't need to give us the warrior story, we are ready to go.
Exactly.
And then you have, I'm not anything against legal, it's just making it up. Legal is like, that's going to be a lot more paperwork. So do parallel storylines unfold? How do you manage that piece?
Yes, very much. So many times when we get in, we begin our own discovery process by asking people questions. We do interviews and we do listening tours so that we can empathetically understand where people are in the journey. And most often, different parts of the organization are in different places on that journey. Yeah. And it could be that it's different by function. Yes. Or it could be that it's different by level. Yes. So the leadership team has already bought in, right? They've been privy to the strategy for a while. They're probably ready to get going, but the rank and file haven't heard it enough times. Maybe they haven't heard it yet. And so they're in a different place. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes organizations make when trying to lead people through change is they don't recognize that their story needs to adapt for each of those audiences that they're going to have to bring along with them. Because the why behind the change is different for them too. Not only are they in a different place, and you have to meet them where they are and start from scratch or keep them going, but you also have to help them understand why that future is good for their role or their specific needs.
Yeah. And do they see a role for themselves in the new script that you're writing?
Right.
And how would my role be different? I mean, if you continue with the theater metaphor and analogy, so right now I'm wearing this costume, and the next scene is my costume going to look different.
True.
And right now I'm the king of my castle. What happens in the next scene? Do I get asked to stand outside?